A story from a couple days ago that made a lot of news was AOC being asked about what the U.S. response would be to aggression by China against Taiwan. And you could just say AOC flubbed her answer. It happens. But what was interesting was Abby Phillip took this as an opportunity to go, okay, MAGA is acting like because she gave a bad answer or took a second to get to a good answer, had a lot of, took a moment for her to, which you could describe as a bad answer rhetorically. That proves she doesn't know what she's talking about on anything. This is the MAGA argument. That proves she doesn't know what she's talking about. She could never be in higher leadership. What a disgrace and a dummy. That's the MAGA argument. But then you think to yourself, you go, okay, so bad answer. I'll play it for you. Awkward. If that's the standard for intelligence in politics, what the hell do they think about Trump when he tries to speak on almost any topic ever?
Well,
and you go, that's whataboutism. I'm telling you what I believe about the AOC answer. Darn. That's life. And then separately saying, could we talk about how inconsistent these MAGA folks are?
Right? J.D. Mandel.
And I'm being driven crazy by the soundboard. And I think it's an important time for us to remember just how word salady and brain mishmash Trump will get. So here's Abby Phillip reporting on it. Then we'll look at the CNN table debate.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is facing a wave of criticism for this foreign policy flub at the Munich Security Conference.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is this is, of course, a very long-standing policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
So you go about 20 seconds or something of stalling. Let's not overblow how catastrophic that is, because you literally have right-wing headlines and statements saying this is the end of her presidential ambitions. Just the quickest pause to request that you click the subscribe button, the simplest, easiest, freest way, completely free, to support the work that we do. Right below the video, click that subscribe button. Back to the video. This. She said a bunch of times. Awkward. Okay. They described it as completely not understanding the issue. But once she got to an answer, she clearly was nervous or something about addressing the question, because it is a complicated one, because the U.S. has taken the posture of being like, don't do it, but we're not going to tell you what we will do if you do. Right? And then Biden came out and was like, we're going to fuck you up. And I was like, whoa, no, hey, Joe, you're not supposed to say that. He was like, that's right, our military get involved. We're gonna kick Xi Jinping in the... And so in Hunter's Biden, we're going to kick Xi Jinping's Biden.
China!
But normally you have this kind of strategic ambiguity. And so it's a tough thing to answer because you're not really supposed to say specifically what we would do, but you're just kind of like, don't do it, China, it'll be bad. And she ultimately got to what is a fine answer for a politician give, which is hopefully through economic and international agreements and stances, we will discourage China from doing such things. Hopefully the actions we take diplomatically will prevent that question from ever coming up. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't answer it, but that's also what politicians do. Okay. But the obviously made the answer feel a little bit like a botch. But please, if you are MAGA, do not tell me, whether even you're watching this and you wouldn't think AOC would be a good candidate for this office or that office or whatever. That's not even what I'm getting at right here. Just really, let's think of the logic here. If you're saying a politician's qualifications come down to giving bad answers like that or having brain farts. Oh, baby, let's talk.
It should come as no surprise MAGA is having a field day with this one.
Move over, Kamala. AOC just cooked up her own signature word salad on the global stage.
She was taking her 2028 bike out for a spin. She hit the embankment. She flipped head over heels and went all the way down the mountain. It's her fault.
After the word salad, AOC froze like a deer in headlights.
To quote Billy Madison, everyone in this room is now dumber because of that answer. Thank you, AOC.
A flub for AOC, but the question is also, what happens when the president, the actual president of the United States, does very similar things on the world stage? Listen.
I watch our police and our firemen down in 7-Eleven, down at the World Trade Center.
When I told them about Iceland, they loved me. Our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland.
Shifting production to Thailand and to Vietnam.
I went to Thailand and I said their thighs aren't even that good, a little bit chubby.
Because of Iceland.
Shifting production to Thailand and to Vietnam.
I solved wars that was unsolvable. Azerbaijan and Albania.
Miami has been a haven for those fleeing communist tyranny in South Africa.
Nambia's health system is increasingly self-sufficient.
Yes, Nambia. Woo! I solved the war between Nambia and Bambia, which is where the deer comes from. Azerbaijan and Albania were fighting, and I said, cut it out. And then I looked over at Nambia and Bambia, and I said, quit it. Gotta settle. And they settled.
Nambia's health system is increasingly self-sufficient. We all know the great Prime Minister of the UK, and we just signed a document. This is, sorry about that. We just signed it, and it's done. And so we have our trade agreement with the European Union.
So look, I'll give you that AOC probably should have been more ready for that question, but are we going to really pretend that the actual president of the United States has not made...
Okay, so then I saw Mediaite, which, I cite a lot. I think that it's a really good outlet. It's nice how they do clips, but I saw they did a story that was called Abby Phillip Bends Over Backwards to Whitewash AOC Gaffe in Hacky Partisan Hit Job. And I was like, hey, chill, Isaac, who wrote this op-ed. Maybe she could have spent a little longer on the AOC gaffe, but what are we doing here? We're going to let the Benny Johnsons of the world... We're going to go, you're right, Benny. She should never be in public again. She doesn't know anything. Whenever Benny? He goes, I remember after Trump's, it was either his, one of his speeches. I can't remember which speech, but he did it. Trump did a speech, incoherent, saying a bunch of random rambles, and it ended, and it cut to Benny, and he was like, this was one of the most intelligent and amazing and inspiring and coherent and brilliant and shockingly, foundationally powerful speeches ever given since Lincoln. And it was like, what the hell? So yeah, I think it's fair for Abby, who's hosting a show where people like debate, to go, let's just consistency check for a second here, because if we're gonna do this is the same thing that happened during the Kamala campaign. I agree. Sometimes you would get asked a question and it'd be like, hey, what are you gonna do on education? And she would say,
you think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
No, she would say, I think that education is, from the standpoint of the foundation of America, the people, the kids that I've met, I've been to different states and I've met kids who tell me, they say, and I grew up in a school where I would talk to the kids who would make a lot of statements about their ambitions and their dreams and their aspirations. And when I think about America and I look in the eyes and you're like, okay, what? Get to the... But she would do one of those and Fox News would be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And then Trump would go 10 times more incoherent, not a peep. So I actually do think that matters, because we can go, that was a bad answer, that was the word salad, but because we're able to acknowledge reality, but they will never acknowledge whenever Trump botches a bazillion answers. So you saw the compilation there. You want to talk about you want to do word salads? You want to do word salads? You want to do word salads? Let's do word salads. Benny, review this. Tell me how this was. Yes, we're going back to it. It was a while ago, but I haven't watched this in a very long time. Let's see.
Third, meaningful change. If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Okay, because it cut out, the question was, what specific piece of legislation on childcare affordability will you advance? That's a very clear question. Way simpler than what should the U.S. posture be militarily on Taiwan. Much simpler. What are you going to do on childcare? I'm going to introduce a bill that subsidizes childcare so that everyone has an opportunity for affordable childcare. Fine. We're going to implement a universal childcare program for all Americans who make less than X dollars per year. Easy. Done. Not a matter of war. Let's see Trump's answer. What piece of legislation on childcare? Let's listen.
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. I was somebody, we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But
in other countries, they just let the kids fend for themselves.
There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country. Because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be getting in trillions of dollars, and as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people.
So you want to, fine, we don't have to do, let's compare every time. I can look just at that answer and go, a lot of her Munich appearance, she gave really interesting answers on a lot of different questions, and that one she botched. She botched it. In politics, you don't want to get stuck saying, for 2 minutes. Not 2 minutes, 20 seconds. See, I had a flub. For 20 seconds. But you also cannot take seriously people who pretend like that should be the end of her political career, and they support the guy who hasn't spoken coherent English since ever.
I do the weave.
And definitely not in the last decade. So I do think it's important to check people's consistency on that. His answer to what legislation would you introduce on childcare was repeating the word numbers a lot, talking about how it's a small number, but it's a big number, but compared to bigger numbers, it's a small number. And essentially the essence of his answer, with a bunch of words that didn't connect well at all, was don't worry about it. That was 2 minutes for him to go, hey, babe, don't worry about it, little lady. That's what he was really trying to say. And you will see, with a straight face, the Benny Johnsons of the world, the Ben Shapiro's of the world, play a clip like that and go, wow, the way that he just comprehensively laid out a childcare proposal is unbelievable. But here's an example of one of the answers I thought was really interesting from her.
The United States right now is experiencing a political pendulum, and depending really the party that is seen most as betraying the working class tends to be the governing party in this moment. Right now, that happens to be the Republican majority. But really, what we are seeing over the last 8 years, I think, has been a growing recognition that of those past errors that go back, that include military interventionism in the Iraq War, that include a recognition of NAFTA as a failed policy for many rural and working class communities. And now I think we are moving in this direction of increased recognition that we have to have a working class centered politics if we are going to succeed, and also if we are going to stave off the scourges of authoritarianism, which also provides political siren calls to allure people into finding scapegoats to blame for rising economic inequality, both domestically and globally.
So the point there being, in a crisis of authoritarianism, some might try to lie to you and tell you, in fending off authoritarianism, you have to put on pause economic justice, if you want to call it that, or combating the economic inequality. That we don't have time for that right now. There's these pressing authoritarian concerns, which there are, obviously. Her point being, one of the ways you take the air out of the sails of the authoritarians is to address the economic inequality. The working class angst fuels the type of authoritarian messaging that can exploit that angst. When people so desperately want an answer for why the system is rigged against them, often a strongman coming in and saying, I can fix it alone, sounds appealing. And connecting the economic to the political, the crisis of our political system connected to the crisis of our economic system, is a very profound and important point for people to understand. And I can tell you, even that answer wasn't perfect. I would have worded it a little bit differently. But, and you heard me kind of like I reiterated it a little bit in a little bit different way, but the point she's making was really crucial. And I know that if Trump ever tried to explain that point, you would just hear him say numbers a bunch of over and over again. How is it that we can prevent the degradation of our democratic institutions by uplifting the working class and ameliorating their economic concerns? Well, when you see what we're bringing in, so many numbers of numbers within. Shut up.
I love
Don't
cows.
And then you saw Megyn Kelly say in response to AOC, actually, you spat and sputtered and humiliated yourself, but okay. To which Chris Cuomo, who I think Chris is getting the Beasley bug. What does that mean? There's a virus right now. There's an epidemic of people getting the Beasley bug. And that is people having an awakening that says, oh my gosh, I was wrong about either both siding too much or supporting MAGA. So in the case of Andrew Schultz, bad case of the Beasley bug. He's like, wait, Trump lied. He's terrible. Sean Ryan, he's realizing it. This sounds like I used to support Trump whenever I word it that way. I've always had the Beasley bug. This doesn't work well. It was going to be cute, but it didn't make much sense. Point is, a lot of people are waking up to the fact that they were lied to by Trump, and now they're shifting toward our viewpoints. Chris Cuomo was never a supporter of Trump, but like for a second there was doing way too much. The problem is equally both. When it's like, well, I mean, they kind of have all the power. They're doing all the bad stuff. So, but now I've seen him on a roll of good takes like this. He said AOC is young and flawed, but there's a reason she would stomp out Kelly like a roach in any poll. Standing for something is better than being about nothing but hate. Remember, she was paid to leave NBC. No one was sad. Talking about Megyn Kelly. And that is another win for Cuomo. And that's not just because I'm going, anytime he says something on the liberal side, I like it. He's actually identifying something very profound. Because some people will see whether it be AOC's youth, or if they don't think that her communication nails it enough, or if they think that she's advocating for policies they believe are naive or something. Sometimes they'll question why she gets so much support if they have perception concerns or whatever around her. And he kind of nails it there, which is if you have those feelings and you're not understanding why someone like her would be so much more popular than Megyn Kelly, among the general electorate, not that Megyn Kelly's running for office, but just to do the thought experiment, is because for whatever her flaws are, you can tell she actually believes in something and cares about something. And Megyn Kelly just seems to be a grifter chasing views.